Hey, movie lovers! Welcome back to another Anatomy of Movie here on Popcorn Talk. Today we dissect Jennifer Lawrence and, of course, Frances Lawrence as they team up together for yet another movie. No, it's not The Hunger Games, so stay tuned as we dissect.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
Welcome indeed. It is Red Sparrow, the latest movie from Jennifer Lawrence. It is rated R for violence, torture, sexual content, language, and some graphic nudity. Damn right it is.
It's all in there.
We have Demetri, Panos.
Hey, movie fans. Hey, Phil.
And I'm Phil
Just
Svitek.
the two of us today.
Just the two of us. We're doing a quick review, so not our normal length, not our normal in-depth dissection, but we'll touch upon a couple of things. We'll truncate things as best as we can, just so you get a little morsel of our thoughts on the movie. First off, 48% on Rotten Tomatoes, and believe it or not, I actually disagree. I think overall...
Lower?
No. I actually like this movie quite a bit.
You did.
I did. And, no, you... First off, couple of things. I got too far into myself. Welcome back if you're returning. We assume that you've seen the movie, so we're going to be a little spoiler-filled. And so forth. And secondly, you can always get our rundown. So even though we aren't doing a full in-depth discussion, we will provide you our rundown, which is a PDF in the description box, so by all means. And as we usually kick things off, we start with overall thoughts, which is what I was getting into. I like this movie. I think it's higher than a 48, to be honest. I don't know if it's a perfect movie, but I thought it was a very good movie. And it was certainly something I've never seen before. I love espionage and movies about espionage, and it played really well. And for all the people that I know right off the bat are going to be like, well, you just like seeing Jennifer Lawrence nude. I did not enjoy it whatsoever. Yes, I would love to see Jennifer Lawrence nude. No, I don't want to see her about to be raped every time that happens. It was very uncomfortable to watch, and for the first 30 minutes, I've never been more uncomfortable in a movie. But then when the real struggle of her became this idea of how does she overcome this life as far as, and more so a culture, I was just fascinated and riveted the entire time.
Fascinating. That's fascinating to me. We talked a little bit about this last week, and so I was really looking forward to sitting down with you because I have an opposing opinion. I didn't like it as much as I expected, and I think part of it, we can go into it a little later, was the marketing. I did not anticipate the dehumanizing aspect of this movie that you brought up. I too did not. I did not enjoy the nude Jennifer Lawrence scenes at all. They were uncomfortable. I wouldn't say they were the most uncomfortable that I've seen in movies. Go see some more movies, but they were. It was shocking to me because it's not what the trailers were selling, so to speak. And after watching the movie, I kind of understand. I just didn't, I wasn't a fan of this movie for a couple of reasons. Number one, I felt that it believed it was smarter than the audience, that it was going to grab the audience, and we were going to give it these big twists and turns, and we're going to be talk heavy and whatnot. And you know, I just, as the movie was, there was one twist in the movie that I didn't see coming.
Which one was that?
When Jeremy Irons' character
reveals himself
as being the mole. Okay, I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting, but ultimately the movie wasn't. That's the thing. Ultimately, this movie wasn't about finding a mole. It was a revenge story. So when the end comes, when we found the mole and this is who, when they took off the hood and it ends up being her cousin or uncle, right? I was like, yeah, that's what this whole movie is. Within the first 10 minutes, this movie telegraphs the disposition of Jennifer Lawrence's character in this movie, you know, where she goes out and she basically beats to hell the ballerinas who more or less ruined her life, like literally ruined her life. And she did it in a very violent fashion. And I was like, whoa, okay. And when she was recruited to go into this Sparrow School, you could tell she was plotting as to how is she going to get out of this, and how is she going to get back at her uncle for putting her in a position that she was in. And ultimately, that's what it came down to. I also couldn't help but think of another movie, and this is what I really wanted to talk about too, that came out last year that I enjoyed a lot more than this movie, and it's the closest comparison and the most recent comparison that I can come up with. And for me, that was Atomic Blonde, which I really liked, learned that you really did not like.
We're opposites.
We're opposites on these two movies, but I felt, to me, Atomic Blonde was a lot more Jean le Carré than it was what the trailers put out there. And that was a tale of Cold War espionage, twists and turns that had some amazing action scenes in it as well. And you had a very engaging female lead character played by Charlize Theron, where Jennifer Lawrence wasn't bad in this movie. I wasn't as engaged in this movie, and I thought the twists and turns in Atomic Blonde came at a much better pace and had me trying to figure things out, where this one didn't as much.
So I'll say this, I didn't mind the pacing. Yeah, could you cut out? It's 2 hours and 20 minutes, so I think you could have cut out some stuff. But I think it's
long.
I think it's less about the actual twist and turn, more so how we get there, and that's what I appreciated. The Atomic Blonde just tries to be too smart and too actiony, whereas this, it was very heady, and the action was so seldom. And whenever there was action, it was some of the most brutal, uncomfortable action I've ever seen. I mean, I've never seen a skin cutter before in my life. And the way that scene, that tension plays out towards the end, and you're like, oh, wait, she's like, what? Whose side is she on? And the way, because I knew she really wanted to escape all of this, but I was like, wait, how's this going to play out? And the way it does, and the way she tricks the guy in order to save the American.
Which guy?
I forget his name. The
assassin guy.
Yeah, the assassin guy.
Yeah.
Versus like having to save Nate Nash. The way that plays out, and it's so truthful and like just brutally honest. I appreciated that, and it creates this world that I've never seen before. Granted, I'd be very curious to see how Russians are taking it, but in that sense, I could see, whether it's the Russians or somebody else, that sort of mentality of like, okay, sexuality is your entry point anywhere in the world, and we're gonna breed you for this to have no human emotion towards that, so you can accomplish for the greater good. I mean, as far as like the common good, yeah, it's a very Eastern European type of mentality, or was. It's certainly in communism.
Right.
Whether or not people actually agreed with it, that was...
Yeah, and again, that to me is where Atomic Blonde succeeded in this movie. Failed because there was a sexuality that Charlize Theron's character used to obtain information and such. And in this movie, again, when I was watching the trailers for Red Sparrow, the thought that first popped into my head was actually Black Widow, the character from the Marvel books, because we've seen a little bit of that character's background and how she was recruited to go to this school to learn to be basically an assassin, and to use part of her charisma, sexuality, let's say. This was literally all about using sexuality to get information. Jennifer Lawrence's character, Dominika, just happened to know how to fight, which sort of kind of came out of nowhere. And I think part of it for me too was the school in Red Sparrow here was said to be extremely hard. Okay, so outside of the dehumanizing aspects, you had Charlotte Rampling as the matron of the school, and she basically tells Dominika point blank, if you don't cut the mustard here, I'm going to shoot you in the head. I'm going to shoot you. And I thought, oh shit, that's what happens to the students if they don't do what's told. And I never saw that happen to anybody. Like, I thought the school was going to be a hell of a lot. I thought that rigidity was going to be there, and that would have made it. Like, you either do as I tell you, or you're dead. Because you're in this school, basically, we've taken away your identity. We've stripped it away from you. And if you die here, no one's going to know or care. And that, to me, is frightening, but I never saw it happen. And
well, I think she might have a slightly different ordeal than everyone else. Granted, yes, I think the stakes are that high for most people. We just never see it played out to that portion. I find that a lot of people find criticism in her saying, like, hey, she all of a sudden gets chosen for this job, and well, how and why does she get chosen for this job when the headmistress is like, you have failed everything I've told you to do. But when you in hindsight, it makes sense. First off, at that point, you're like, okay, it's the uncle just trying to be as nice as he can. Which is
manipulative.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole show we could do on the psychology of uncles that send their nieces to sex camp, essentially. Regardless, the true catalyst of it was not him. It was Jeremy Irons who was playing the fiddler behind the scenes, and so it makes sense in hindsight of like, wow, there's a lot. Because they have a great scene early on, too, one-on-one, and I didn't read more into that than it was at the time. Right. And I thought a lot of things played, the sub, you mentioned, okay, it's a revenge story, then it's a story about figuring out the mold, so there's our A and B plots. The third subplot about the going to Britain with the American, with the chiefs of staff and so forth, I thought that got slightly convoluted, so I'm not going to take anything away from there. But I thought it was fascinating enough in terms of the tension that it built in those moments that I was like, okay, I'm willing to go on the ride.
Right, and this is where my comparison to Atomic Blonde comes in, because Atomic Blonde takes place during the Cold War. I think from a visual standpoint, it was more stylistically filmed. It did have an amazing soundtrack, but also, though, it was about sussing out a mole. There's a mole in the agency. You have to try to figure out who it is. Oh, and there's a guy that has a knock list, because there's a knock list here, too. You've got to get that list. You've got to protect that guy. And at the same time, you're figuring out who the mole is. And they threw out a lot of red herrings. It felt like a fish market on a Friday during Lent. But at the end of that movie, if you haven't seen Atomic Blonde, at the end of that movie, when it's revealed who the mole is, when it's revealed who the mole is, I was like, yeah, I got to those steps and I may have figured it out like a minute or two before the reveal, but you're like, wow. I was like, okay, here it was revealed to us who the mole actually is. But when we got to the very, very end, then I was wondering, wait, what the hell's going on? Wait, is he still a mole? Are there two moles? Like, yeah. So there were two moles, or is he just like, oh, you're going to be the mole now? And
well,
it was, we give up, we get the cousin or the uncle. He's, he gets killed, rightfully so. And then, okay, so there are two moles now working for the United States, or did Jeremy Irons just retire? And it's like, hey, I still get to get my pension, and I show up at work, and congratulations.
No, I think he's very much still going to be. He had the reason why he revealed himself. He gave her options. Right. He did not know what she had managed to be setting up this entire time. So he said, listen, you got me, right? One way or another, you got me. But you have a choice to make. You can either continue my work and fight for a better life, which I believe I've seen in you, or you just, that's it. You rise and that's it. You'll be with your uncle and you'll get something else.
You'll rise and my career will come to a very abrupt end.
But either way, he fails, right?
Right.
So it was a very singular type thing. The choice was now for her. So it didn't matter about him. She completely rewrote the script and was like, no. Listen, I've laid these things in there. It's going to be him. And I think she was shocked that he was the mole. But it's like, okay, no. You don't get off that easy either. You're going to help me so that way I can be eventually the mole. But now, like, out of all things, I've given up my uncle to prove to the state that I care about the state first and foremost rather than family.
Okay.
I mean, that's to me, it's very darkly poetic.
Yeah. So there are two moles.
Yeah.
Like, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Now, the movie is based on a 2013 novel by Jason Matthews of the same name. I've not had the pleasure of reading it.
Neither have I.
So I can't make any comparisons, nor did I really look into the similarities and differences. But, if you're interested, it's about a 400-page book. I am interested to read it, given what I saw, so I'm curious. But... okay, one of the things I know you wanted to talk about was Jennifer Lawrence as a movie star.
Yeah, and again, I want to talk about two performances because it wasn't necessarily. I didn't have a problem with performances from Jennifer Lawrence to Joel Edgerton, who just like he becomes better in my eye. I enjoy seeing him on screen, and he's proven that he could be in front of a camera and behind a camera. He can do comedy. You can do drama. You can do this kind of movie. I really enjoyed seeing him. Charlotte Rampling as the matron was fine. Mary-Louise as Parker. Her character you knew was not long for this world. Jeremy Irons too was fine. Performances are fine. The direction was fine, albeit for me the movie did run long. It could have been trimmed down somewhat. So from a tech aspect, I didn't have any problems with the movie. I felt that it took a very long about way to get to where it ended. So, and yes, talking about Jennifer Lawrence, I think there was an article, it's in March 12th Hollywood Reporter, and the headline is, "If Jennifer Lawrence can't open a movie, who can?" And I find it very interesting. Because, Jennifer Lawrence, Red Sparrow, 16 million. It's not huge for an opening. It's not what you would consider from Jennifer Lawrence. She was also in Mother.
So two flops.
Talk about a movie that's made me angry. She was also in Passengers with Chris Pratt. Now, just seeing those two names in a marquee, you would figure would garner something, and the movie did okay at best. And so it just makes one wonder. There seems to be a shift. Like, who can open up a movie anymore, really? Who could be a movie star? Because there was a time where you could put an actor, because they were a star, you could put him in a movie. It would make a lot of money. Harrison Ford has earned that stature. Tom Cruise, of course, has earned that stature. Tom Hanks has earned that stature as well. Meryl Streep. All these people could open up movies. And Jennifer Lawrence for a long while, whether she was paired with Bradley Cooper, The Hunger Games. But again, The Hunger Games is a franchise. But
X-Men.
So it makes me wonder, have we become movie audiences that are more, are we more in love with the characters that we go see in movies, superhero characters, than we are the actors who play them? And listen, actors have been interchangeable. James Bond has been played by many people, as well as Batman, as well as Superman. And again, with the Marvel, that they're going to be rebooting some people, so they will still continue to be popular. Robert Downey Jr. was in, The Judge, I think, with Robert Duvall. I'm not sure that movie was, I don't have the information in front of me. So just by putting a popular actor, because he's popular for playing Iron Man, into another movie, if they're not, I'm just thinking that movie audiences are definitely becoming, they care more about the characters, not necessarily who's playing the characters. Does that make sense?
It does. It's the franchise, it's the story. What I get, this is my ideal version of it all. The reason why you put in a Jennifer Lawrence into any movie is, again, this is my ideal world, not because she's Jennifer Lawrence and has star power. You put her in because she's Jennifer Lawrence, who has an amazing talent.
Correct.
That got her to that level of fandom.
Right.
And I am like, listen, at the end of the day, I understand people's gripe with Red Sparrow, but that doesn't mean I don't want to see more movies like it.
Sure.
We talked about Wrinkle in Time, and it wasn't the greatest movie. That doesn't mean I don't want to see people make and try to attempt movies like that.
No, listen, I'm right there with you. To me, it's sad because these movies, if this continues, there's always the big talk about how these middle movies are disappearing when they shouldn't. I don't want them to disappear because they do make up a variety. They build to the variety of movies we get through the years. I don't want a year's worth of Marvel superhero DC movies. I don't want a year's worth of just Star Wars movies. I want variety in my films, and I want to see comedies with different people, and I want to see all these things happen. But I just, a perfect example of someone who is sort of kind of riding this wave, that it seems like almost anything that this person's in is a hit, is The Rock. Take out Baywatch, perhaps. Maybe that didn't break, but Central Intelligence, Jumanji. When you look at the movies that this guy is in, he is riding a $100+ million wave of movies because he's in them. It doesn't,
but they're
and it
also
doesn't matter.
Decent movie. I mean,
some of them, yeah.
I mean, that's why Baywatch wasn't a decent movie. Fast and the Furious, people love. Granted, it's with multiple people. Jumanji, him and Kevin Hart are hysterical.
Right.
Central Intelligence, same thing. So,
well, it's just, without developing character pieces, they won't develop more stars. But clearly, I think a movie like Red Sparrow is somewhat of a character piece. I do, again, I'll go back to the marketing. The marketing made it seem as if there might have been a little bit more action, that it could have been predicated as somewhat more on action, which it really wasn't. I want to talk too about the torture scene. If I'm going to say good things about the movie, I actually felt that the torture scene was handled very well, precise, and succinct in how you do a torture, because we didn't see the actual skin graft happening. The machine was on the back. It was where the camera wasn't. We heard the sound, we heard the screaming, and then we saw peeling off, but we didn't see it happening. The movie could have gone all hostile on us, and we could have seen everything happening. I thought that he did a very good job. Particularly in that scene, because there are other Zero Dark 30 had like a waterboarding scene that was very uncomfortable. Some of the other torture scenes, when they're trying to bring out Jennifer Lawrence, thinking that she's like the mole, and they're sort of waterboarding her. I found some of that to be done very well too, and I really think that as far as a director went, Francis Lawrence did a good job. They also they have a chemistry working together.
Yeah. Well, that was, as far as the editing, before we wrap this out, as far as the editing, they did have even a longer cut, and they made sure how they finessed it, that there was an emotional side to Jennifer Lawrence throughout the movie, and that did play. And I think part of the technique in those things is it used, like when you talk about the skin grafter, it's a very familiar sound. It's like an electric razor for a man. It's got that buzz.
Yeah.
So, something that you're used to on a daily basis all of a sudden gets turned on, and that sound is repurposed for something torturous like that. Yeah, it brings about different meaning.
But I'm going to bring up another torture scene, and that is Marathon Man. Is it safe? That's a torture scene. I was far more uncomfortable watching Laurence Olivier drill holes into Dustin Hoffman's mouth than, this scene here. I'm not saying it's all a garden of roses, But to me, that scene in Marathon Man is pretty damn uncomfortable to watch. Hey, you'll never want to go to a dentist again, and if you ever hear the words "Is it safe?" you'll jump. So, and that scene is done to great effect, which I think is what they were trying to accomplish here in this movie as well. So.
All right, final thoughts before we wrap it up. From my perspective, the one thing that I'll touch upon that we haven't is I really enjoyed the score. It was very classical and played very well. In fact, the opening scene with the ballet and him running away, the way they constructed that was fantastic.
Yeah.
What about you, Demetri?
No, I felt that the score for this movie worked very well. It's what a score should be. Again, it's a major difference too, where Atomic Blonde used a lot of 80s source music to punch things up, but it was a much more stylistically directed movie than Red Sparrow was. Red Sparrow was very drab and gray. You're right. I don't know how Russia would feel about this movie. It didn't look that great. And the social casts there. But I thought that the score worked for what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to help the story, not overpower it, and not be, invisible. No.
All right, so at DMovies1701 for Demetri.
Yes, please support me on Twitter.
And I'm at Phil Svitek, and you can check out my website, philsvitek.com. Thank you guys.
You have a website?
Look at that.
I'm going to check that out. I did not know. Jesus Christ, I always learn, he's so secretive.
I've been saying that for weeks now.
Have you?
Anyway.
Then I'm not paying attention.
Thank you guys as always. Truly, truly appreciate it. We've got tons of stuff in our history for you to check out. And of course,
other Jennifer Lawrence movies.
Other Francis Lawrence movies.
True.
So, and I know this was a quick review, so let us know your thoughts, and we'll be happy to chat more with you guys in the comments section and so forth. And that's why we give our Twitter handles, so that way you guys can interact with us. We'll be back next week with Tomb Raider and Love, Simon. Until then, bye.
Bye, all.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the entire Popcorn Talk Network, we would like to thank you for tuning in. For questions or comments, be sure to visit popcorntalk.com. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been a presentation of the Popcorn Talk Network.